When using off-camera flash, it is drilled in our heads to put our light source as close as possible to our subject. And that makes sense because we want our light source to be as big as possible relative to our subject because that produces the softest light. But do we always, or should we always, put our light source as close to our subject? Are there times where maybe we want to rethink that? That's what I want to talk about in this video. What up, YouTube fan? We in here, anthonytoglife, back with another video. And in this one, I really want to challenge you to think a little bit deeper when it comes to using off-camera flash and where you place your light. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we typically do put our light source as close to our subject as possible because generally we do want the softest light possible. So having that light source close to our subject makes that light source relative to our subject as big as possible. And that is going to yield us the softest light that we can get. But sometimes we need to step back and not just do what we do because we do it, but think about what we're trying to achieve. Think about everything from a bigger picture and decide if really that is the way that we want to go. Now, when it comes to light, one thing that we want to keep in mind as I'm talking throughout this video is the inverse square law. Now, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it because I don't really feel like you need to understand the scientific part of it. But in short, basically, the closer your light is to your subject, the faster that light is going to fall off and the more dramatic you're going to have between your highlight and your shadow. And that's really what I want us to think about in this video. When you put your light source as close as possible to your subject, so oftentimes you'll have the light source where the modifier is just right outside of frame. When you have that light source close to your subject, you're going to have a very dramatic fall off. So if you have your light to the left of your subject, the left side is going to be lit. Obviously, your right side is going to be the shadow side of the face. But the transition from your highlight to your shadow is going to be very harsh, very abrupt. Now, your light source is still soft. The light that is hitting your subject is still soft, but you're going to have deeper shadows. You're going to go from highlight to shadow a lot quicker. So the look on your subject is going to be very dramatic or more dramatic than what you may be wanting. So when it comes to light placement, sometimes you don't necessarily want that quick and abrupt fall off into your shadow. Maybe you're only using one light source. Now let me step back. Of course, you can use a reflector, bring that reflector in. It's going to bounce some light back in. It's going to fill in those shadows. But you may be in a situation where you have only one light and you don't have a reflector, or you don't want to go through the hassle of using a reflector. This is where you really would benefit in stepping outside of always just putting your light source as close to your subject as possible and pulling that light source back. And again, the inverse square law is going to come into effect. By pulling that light source back, you're not going to have as dramatic of a fall off. Now, obviously, because you are pulling that light source from your subject, your light source isn't going to be as soft. That is true. Your shadow pattern is going to change. The light on your subject, the pattern is going to change. But depending upon how far you pull it back, if you don't pull, you don't have to pull it back, 5-10 feet. But depending on how far you pull it back, the light can still be relatively soft and it still can be pleasing. But what you're going to get is that you're not going to have that dramatic fall off of light. So your subject is going to be a little bit more evenly lit. Now you're going to still have that shadow side of the face, especially if you keep the light in the same general area and angle to your subject. You are still going to have shadows. But what you're going to see is that those shadows are not going to be as deep, and that transition from highlight to shadow is not going to be so quick and abrupt. So now that I've mentioned that, let's jump in and let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so right now I have a continuous light setup. This is just a Flashpoint FV150. That's completely irrelevant to what we're doing here. Then I have a 22-inch beauty dish. Now, we'll be honest in saying a beauty dish probably isn't the best modifier to use because I'm not really going to use a beauty dish the way that they're designed to be used, but I already had this set up and I like to keep things easy. So this is what I'm using. So right now, as you can see, the beauty dish is right up to Quinn the mannequin here. So I would say it's roughly a foot apart. Now, Just as an FYI and a digression, a general rule of thumb is that you typically want to have your light source as far away from your subject as the modifier is wide. So this is a 22-inch beauty dish. The ideal position of this would be 22 inches from the subject. It is probably like 12 inches from the subject right now, just because I really want to show the differences here, but that's just a little FYI, okay? So as you can see, the modifier is right up close. I'm going to use my light meter because I want to make sure that I am metering the same, so that way you can see the true difference between the shadows and I can make sure everything stays how it's supposed to stay, okay? So let's get a meter reading. All right, so right now I'm getting f5.6. I want to keep that at f4. So if I meter that, so if I have my camera set to 1/60th of a second, ISO 100 at f4, that would be the right exposure. So let me set the camera to those settings. So that exposure looks good, but as you can see on the shadow side of the face, those are a little dark. And so this does yield more of a moody look. Now, depending upon what you're going for, this may work, but let me move the modifier back and show you the difference of if we don't have the modifier right on the subject. So I'm going to move it back, and that's probably 2 feet right there, two feet, maybe a little bit more. So let's do a meter reading to see where we need to be. So right now I'm getting 2.2. So to get this to be at f4, I need to drop the camera down to a 50th of a second. So let's make that adjustment, drop that camera down to a 50th. So now if I put those two side by side, what you're immediately going to notice, number one, is that you have more light on the background. And that is something that you want to keep in mind. If you want to not have such a dramatic light and look on your background, moving that light source further from your subject and allowing a more evenly lit scene will get you more light on that background. And so then that way it's not as dramatic. So that's the first thing to look at. And then the second thing to look at is the shadow side of the face. Now, having these images side by side, you definitely can see that the shadows are more filled in with that light source back. So you still have your shadow. And as you can see, the light pattern did change a little bit on the subject. So of course, you're not going to get the same light pattern in the same direction of the shadow. But all in all, the light still looks good on the subject. But what we have achieved by pulling the light back is that, number one, we've put more light on the background. Number two, we've opened up the shadows on the face. So now this portrait would not be as dramatic. So the true point that I'm trying to make in this video is that when you are using off-camera flash, don't just do things because it's what's in your head or it's what YouTube or the internet tells you to do. Think about what you're trying to achieve. If you are trying to get a portrait and you're not looking for drama, then you don't necessarily have to have your light source right on your subject. And then you're going to have that dramatic transition from highlight to shadow. You're going to have dramatic light fall off on your background. So your background is going to be a lot darker. So don't just place the light where someone says this is where the light should be. Think about what you're trying to do and think about what would be the best placement for your light to achieve the look that you are trying to get. That really is the point that I'm wanting to drive home. I think too often right now, a lot of photographers are learning things from YouTube and the internet, and it's like, this is how you do it. And so they do it that way every single time, and they don't really know why, or they don't know what can be done if they do things a little bit different, shift things here, do this, place this here. So I'm really just challenging you to not just follow the mundane routine of what we know, but really think about what you're trying to do and then make your decisions on your gear based off of that. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, or if you just want to support me and my channel, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Go ahead and like this video. I haven't made videos in a while, so I'm a little rusty. And if you like this content and you want to make sure you don't miss any future content, because there's definitely going to be a lot more coming, go ahead and subscribe, ring that bell. As always, I appreciate you rocking with me. I appreciate you watching my videos. And until the next video, take care.